Welcome back to the channel, guys. Here's another Survivor I recently picked up. In this video, we're going to see if we can breathe some life back into it. I would venture to guess it's around 50 years old, but I'm really not sure. I've found little to nothing about this company, this model, or most importantly, replacement parts. Right off the bat, I can see it's missing a few key parts, like the driver for the torque converter cover, a foot peg, and the air filter. I will say this thing is heavy and built like a tank, and no doubt raised some hell in a previous life. Now, the previous owner claimed that the motor was no good, but it's not locked up or anything, so I'm curious to see what kind of issues we run into. Alright, let's get into it. We'll start with some penetrating oil on some of these badly rusted areas. Next, we'll remove the gas tank. I'll be replacing this fuel line anyway, so I'll just go ahead and cut it off. The tank is in need of some attention, but it definitely could be worse. Now let's check compression. It looks like about 60 psi is all we're going to get. I'm going to use this little concoction of penetrating oil and two-stroke mix to lubricate the cylinder and see if it's enough to start the engine. Even though it started, 60 is probably the minimum for this motor to run, so I'm going to pull it off and see if I can figure out why it's so low. The oil is definitely old, but I don't see any metal shavings in it. The head is actually pretty clean of carbon, and while the cylinder wall isn't great, it certainly could be worse. Alright, well, things are starting to point towards a possible valve issue, so let's get the carb out of our way, we'll clean it and see what else we can find. So the valves are tight and the faces have developed some pretty good grooves, which can definitely prevent them from seating. Let's go ahead and clean them up, lap them, and see if we can get them back within normal spec. Again, the head isn't too bad, but we'll go ahead and clean it up while we're at it. Alright, that's a lot better, and for that we used a brass brush to prevent gouging the surface. So I got the valves reinstalled, did another compression test, and as you can see, we've jumped up nicely. Now that we know we've got a good motor, let's go ahead and tear down this jack shaft. I'll need to replace the entire torque converter assembly as I can't find a driver to match this original driven unit. Even after removing the set screw, this collar refuses to come off, so we'll have to give it some persuasion. Alright, well we got everything broken down as far as I think we need to go. Here's a look at the original driven unit, which is the Comet TC88. We're going to need a new belt, which should remain roughly the same length. We'll measure it and then we'll get some parts ordered. And of course, we'll give everything a thorough cleaning. The carb is pretty clean, but as you can see, there are flakes of rust in the bowl, which probably traveled down from the tank. That looks a lot better, and I don't see any obvious reason why this carb won't work just fine. Now let's address the tank. So after putting it out there to the online community, I found out that the TC88 can be upgraded to a 20 series torque converter. Now these aren't OEM Comet parts, but hopefully they'll work just fine. The reason why these systems are interchangeable is because they're both designed to run inboard. You can see the new pulley is a little bit wider, so we'll have to modify the jack shaft to make it work. I used my Dremel tool to cut a little groove, and that's where a snap ring will now hold the driven unit in place. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall everything, and once everything's all back in place, I'll go ahead and tighten everything down. These little bolts on the rear axle also work as a chain tensioner, but one of the bolts is sheared, so we'll have to try and grab a hold of what's left and get a new nut on there. I'll use the side that isn't sheared to find the right size nut. So we got some new fuel line installed with a fuel shutoff switch. I got a new air filter installed, and I went ahead and added a very basic kill switch. Now it's time to see how she runs.